And I would also like to take a moment to recognize some former elected officials. We have Brian Webb, Town Council Flower Mound, and Richard Fleming, Farmers Branch Carrollton School Board. And at this moment, we will take some time to recognize all of the candidates who are running. As I will call out the office, please stand and wave your hand. If you're running for U.S. Congress, please stand. Awesome. Yes. And are there any candidates for State House in the building? Woo! Are there any county commissioner candidates in the building? Are there any candidates running for anything else in the building? Well, y'all got to get to work because we need to run for more stuff, okay? That is awesome. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for doing the work. I look forward to hearing what these wonderful panelists have to say to us today. Thank you.
All right, I'd also like to welcome a special guest from the Texas Democratic Party who drove up from Houston and is going back tonight just for this event, Mr. Chris Hollins.
Thank you, Debbie. Another special thanks to WOW and all of your leadership, Debbie. To Plano Democrats, thank you so much for your role in this. And Frisco Democrats and the leadership of Mr. Ira Bershad, thank you so much for making today a reality. I want to share a very quick secret with y'all. In 2020, we're going to turn Texas blue. And let me tell you what that means. We're going to start at the state house level. We are going to elect the first Democratic Speaker of the House in decades. We're going to expand our congressional majority. And as you're going to hear today, we're going to elect a U.S. Senator to the United States Senate from the state of Texas. And so I want to thank all of the candidates who are going to come and share their vision with us. But most of all, I want to thank and encourage you. We've done a lot of work. We saw so much change in 2018, and we're going to continue that change in 2020 to take over the State House, to continue to keep our major counties blue: Dallas County, Tarrant County, Harris County, Bexar County, and all the way throughout Texas. And that's going to take your sweat. That's going to take your energy. And so I look forward to standing along with you in that fight. And remember, the Texas Democratic Party is not me, it's not the staff back in Austin, it's all of us. And it's going to take all of us to drive the change that we want to see in 2020 and years to come. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and I'm excited to be in this fight with you.
And now I'd like to introduce a man who needs no introduction, who leaves no stone unturned, covers every detail, and puts on the most amazing events. Wouldn't you agree? Mr. Ira Bershad, President of Frisco Democratic Club.
Welcome, Democrats. Hello. Welcome to America's fastest growing city, Frisco, Texas. We have this event being live streamed all around the state, in every major city around the state and probably beyond. So what I would like to do is get this crowd to turn around for 1 second on a count of 3 and yell, "Hello, Texas." There's the cameras. 1, 2, 3. Hello, Texas. Awesome. I would like to start with a few thank yous. The first and the most important to me is Collin College. This place is awesome. They have hosted us for multiple events. They are professional. They do everything they can to put on a great event. And so thank you to Collin College, to President Matkin, to Susan Cordell and her ops team, to Colin and the tech team. I know that's a first, but Colin, your team's awesome. to Sergeant Hawkins and the security team, and of course, a welcome to all our candidates. Give them a big round of applause. I never want to host an event without also thanking the media in the back. Yes. There are elected officials that don't treat the media that friendly, but I'm going to always say thank you to them. You want to know why? Because I want them to keep coming back. So thank you, media, for covering this. I'd like to recognize, are there any veterans in the crowd? If you can, please either wave or stand up, either way, and give them a big round of applause. As some have said in this state, the eyes of Texas are upon us. Because for Texas Democrats, the road to the U.S. Senate seat starts right here today. Thank you for being here. I can tell you that Frisco Democratic Club is very proud to be hosting this event. We're also proud to be partnering with the Plano area Democrats and the Women Organizing Women Democrats. So please say thank you to them. Here's the reality. We know that the big cities matter. We know that this election is going to be the biggest of our lives. Everybody says it, but I think there's no debate. This one's the biggest. And the big cities are going to matter, but so are these competitive suburbs. They're going to matter. The Friscos, Planos, Dentons, Flower Mounds, Allens, and McKinneys. These cities across Denton County and Collin County and beyond are going to make the difference in this election. Do you believe that? Here in Frisco, we're trying to do our part to lead where we can, the Frisco Democrats, to help turn Texas blue in 2020, and we know we're going to do it. I have 3 questions. Number 1, who here is ready to send a Democrat to the United States Senate? Who here is ready to change how they do business in Washington? And who here is ready to get action, finally, on gun violence, on health care costs, on climate change, and on all the other matters that impact us in the state and in this country? It is time, and we are energized, and we are ready. I thought so. I didn't hear what you said. Today, we officially raised the curtain on 2020. This event is an opportunity for these candidates, who have traveled, many of them from around the state, to introduce themselves to us, but also for us to introduce ourselves to them. So I welcome your enthusiasm throughout the event, and I just have one more question. You guys ready to start? Yeah. All right. Our moderator today is the WFAA senior political reporter, and he hosts a show on Sunday mornings called Inside Texas Politics at 9 a.m. Please give a big Frisco and North Texas welcome to Mr. Jason Whiteley.
All right, let's bring the candidates up too while we're getting things going. So come on up, guys. Remember, whoever sits farthest away from me gets the hardest questions, so keep that in mind as you take your seats up here. What a lineup too, though, Ira. This is impressive. And as people take their seats here, the crowd, you guys can go ahead and have a seat. The crowd really shows the interest we have in how much interest there is in the 2020 election. People across the state watching on live streams as well, too, so there is a lot of attention on this. Since we have so many candidates on stage, we're going to impose some time limits on this. We're asking each of you to do 1-minute answers and rebuttals as needed as well. I'm not going to cut people off, but just be considerate of your time so we can hear from everybody on stage. So with that, let's begin. Let's let each candidate briefly introduce themselves to you so we know who we're dealing with here. Simi, you're first.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for having us here. My name is Sema Hernandez. I am a candidate for United States Senate, a Democrat. I'm a mother of 4. I'm an environmental justice advocate. I was the previous Texas Poor People's Campaign co-chair, organizer, and I'm also currently the president of an organization called Care and for Pasadena Communities, which is entirely focused on environmental justice issues with the fossil fuel, or against the fossil fuel industry and the corporate interests that impact our lives every day.
My name is Chris Bell, and like countless Texans, I've had enough of John Cornyn and Donald Trump. Enough is enough, and it's time that we all come together, and it's so great to see all of you here this afternoon, but it's time for all us to come together to make sure that come 2021, Donald Trump and John Cornyn are both either looking for new jobs or their pension checks. I've been in this fight a very long time. I'm a former Houston council member, U.S. congressman, and Texas Democratic nominee for governor back in 2006. I actually fought against some of the same lobbyists and insiders who protect John Cornyn and keep him in power, and it was insiders that broke the law to redistrict the seat I held in Congress and beat me. But I'm proud that I stood up for the same ethical standards that I'd stood up for as a member of Houston City Council, and broke a 7-year truce on the filing of ethics complaints and filed one against Tom DeLay to start his disgraceful exit from the United States Congress. That's the same fight I plan to take back to Washington as your United States Senator, and thank you so much for having me here today.
My name is Royce West. I've served in the state senate for the past 26 years, but before I move forward, I think it appropriate, given what's happening in Collin County today between El Paso and Plano football teams and what happened in Midland, Odessa, that we just have a moment of silence, 60 seconds if you mind, of silence for the victims of those hideous acts. Thank you. My name is Royce West. Many of you already know me. You know, when I think about why am I running for the state senate, I'm running because I have a vision for the future for the state of Texas. I'm running because of my track record on the fundamental values that Texans and Democrats care about. I'm running because there's a lot of potential that's untapped in the state of Texas in terms of being able to take action. And you can be assured that if you look at my track record, one way that you can kind of determine where a person's going to go, you can look at their past performance. If you look at my past performance on issues related to women's rights, if you look at my past performance as it relates to immigrant issues, issues related to education, civic involvement, you will see that I've performed consistent with the fundamental values that many of you have, and you know, based on my performance, exactly what I'm going to do when you elect me as your next U.S. Senator. The fact is that there's a lot of action to be taken. If we work together like we're doing in this particular room, where there's probably over 300 Democrats, we're going to get things done in Washington when I'm elected as your next U.S. Senator. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Edwards, and I'm running to be your next U.S. Senator. I currently serve in office, serving 2.3 million Houstonians as an at-large Houston City Council member. I seek to bring the same hands-on, results-oriented, people-centered approach to Washington to make sure that your needs, that you all, the people of Texas, are front and center and getting the results that you deserve and so desperately need in our communities. It's so important that you have leadership that is not only focused on the issues that matter most to you, but that can deliver. There is a reason that people feel disconnected oftentimes in politics. You have elected officials, you have politicians, you have people running for office often give great speeches. But it's time to translate those speeches into action, and it's time to get that action to work for you. So whether it be for extending access to health care, as millions of Texans are uninsured, or making sure that all Texans feel like they are part of today and tomorrow's economy. I'm running for the U.S. Senate to make sure you feel the impact in your lives.
In Reagan's first inaugural address, he took advantage of an inflation crisis that had many causes, and he famously said, "Government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." Over the last 4 decades, we've seen a Republican Party that has not just tried to limit the size of government, but tried to reduce our faith in government. Shortly after Reagan's tenure, we ended the Cold War and we began globalization, the era of globalization. During that time, appreciate it, thank you. During that time, not only did we take an approach that advantaged the private sector over democracy, we saw that there was a change taking place in how we tackled everything in our politics. There's a direct line that you can draw from that policy of neglect in government to the challenges that we see today in immigration, trade, inequality, the environment, and the state of democracies around the world. It is important for all of us to understand that we, the people, are the republic. We are the government. And make no mistake about it, we are the solution to today's present circumstance. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cristina Ascension Ramirez, and I'm running for Senate because I want a government that belongs to and serves us, ordinary Texans. Now, I'm not a rich woman, and I don't come from a well-connected family, but I'm a person like many of you that when I see things that are unjust or unfair, I get angry. And it's what led me over the last decade and a half to lead and found some of our state's most important civil and community rights organizations, and to take on some of the most powerful special interest groups in this state to make sure that working people, the people that build our homes, our schools, our roadways, had good, safe jobs and living wages. It's what led me to take on the student debt crisis with young people in this state, and led me to help mobilize tens of thousands of young voters to build a democracy where everyone's voice is heard. I've helped pass legislation that's today better protects the rights of hundreds of thousands of Texans. I am running because I know that on every single major issue that our country faces, whether it be from gun control, climate change, immigration, or income inequality, that no state has more to gain or lose than our state. And I know that in Texas we can solve these issues because we can dream big because we are big. And that we deserve a senator that has the guts and courage to stand up for what is right and lead for this state and our country. Thank you.
All right, let's dive into some issues now, too. Voters are seeing everybody up here on stage and wondering, I might know some of you, but how are you all different from each other? So let's start with you, Christina, and come back this way. Give us one issue that defines your campaign. What is it and why?
I think there are many issues that will define my campaign, but I think what comes to mind to speak about is the issue right now of gun violence. You know, I'm a mother of a 2-year-old little boy, and the most harrowing place I will probably ever take him will be to his kindergarten classroom. That I graduated high school the year of Columbine, and I've been waiting my entire adult life for Congress to take action. But instead of doing things like passing universal background checks, getting assault weapons out of the hands of civilians, our legislators have been teaching children how to play dead in their classrooms. That's why I'm supporting folks like I See Moms Demand Action, folks on the ground that have been the victims of gun violence, to actually do the common sense solutions that most Americans want. Because I know there is nothing wrong with our society, but there is something wrong with our politicians that have cared more about their contributions from the NRA than American lives. And I'm funded by the people that I want to represent, and I am proud that I will never accept a dime from the NRA or any corporation that's willing to put money ahead of the lives of American people. Thank you.
Adrian?
Thank you. You know, the question is about what makes me different or any one of us candidates different. The reality is going to be in this election what makes all of us different. What are we doing different as citizens in this particular election? And my approach when I ran for governor, I started with an approach of strategic change, structural change. But in order to sell structural change, in order to sell the type of change that we're going to need, and it's ugly stuff, it's boring stuff. Some of that we'll get into as we address some of these issues. But I cannot make a shift in that structural change unless I bring you along, the citizens, with me. And that means we're going to have to get to work. The state of our nation really isn't dependent on candidates. Candidates, you decide which candidate you want to amplify. But the question is going to be, how educated are all of us? And some of that means we're going to have to do work. If you look at my website today, I'm starting with you all. I'm starting with, what are the basic building blocks that all of us are going to need to do this evaluation better? To then put the people in place that actually can make change. We have, all candidates can all put out progressive ideas, and we're all on the same team in terms of that front. The question is, how much are you going to push public will to support any of us to do anything? And that road is tough. That road is going to require some things that are going to make us all feel uncomfortable. It's going to make us tackle institutions internal to our party as well as external to our party. And that's a fight we're going to have. And hopefully we'll have that discussion here today. Thank you.
And again, Councilwoman, the question is, what one issue defines your campaign?
The one issue that I would like to highlight, there are obviously many, but one that I want to highlight is deeply personal to me, and that happens to be expanding access to health care. All of us in this room, whether it's personal or family members, friends, we've all been touched. We've all been impacted by access to health care. When I was about 10 years old, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And although he passed away when I was about 17 years old, I remember as a young child and young teen asking my dad, well, who was going to pay for this experimental treatment he was getting? What would happen to him if they said no? Having that fear, having that type of anxiety, and having to try to figure out where we fit in this healthcare system of ours was something that I will never forget. And I know that each and every one of you need a leader who understands the urgency of making sure that we are providing access now. And so for anybody who thinks they have a license to spend 15, 10, 7, 5 years even debating healthcare in our country, I have news for them. The needs of the people can't wait. And that is a focus and an urgency, and then of course understanding and appreciating about the importance of results. Because for so many Americans and so many Texans, this stuff is not political. This really is an issue of life or death, and we need to treat it that way.
All right. I too want to make certain that we look at the issues concerning insurance and concerning health care. And I, for one, would ask my colleagues up here, for all of us, to take a pledge that all of us agree that health care should be a fundamental right to all Americans. When we begin to look at the statistics right here in the state of Texas, I've worked to try to expand Medicaid in the state of Texas. When Perry was governor, we tried to get him to expand Medicaid in the state of Texas when the Affordable Care Act was put in place. $10 billion a year we wanted to put into our health care system, and the Republicans said no to it. $10 billion a year. When you begin to look at the issues of health care today, we lead the country in the number of children that are uninsured. We lead the country in terms of the number of citizens that are uninsured. It needs to be a fundamental right, but also understand this. You can't change this ship in one day because you're going to have Democrats and Republicans in Congress. And what we're going to have to do is to make certain as Democrats, when we retake the Senate, that this is in fact a priority. When we retake the presidency, that it is a priority. And then we have to work with our colleagues like that and work with us in order to make certain that the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, is fixed. Thank you.
Well, since this is our first forum, it's hard to say what differentiates all of us. I think just looking around, it's pretty clear I wear much more colorful socks than my competitors. that's all that really jumps out right now. Look, there's going to be a lot of similar positions on issues. I support access to Medicare for all. I want to see an all-out ban and buyback program on assault weapons. Weapons of war don't need to be in the hands of individuals. But the issue that I think really separates me from my competitors is experience. I've been to Congress. I know what it's like to serve in Congress, and I know what it's like not just to talk about issues, but to actually get things done. My tenure was brief, but there was a lot of progress in those 2 years, and I learned a heck of a lot, and I can't wait to go back and serve you once again.
Environmental justice is extremely important and personal to me. And to convey that in 60 seconds is impossible without actually telling you why it's important. As a young child, I witnessed the oppressive conditions in which my grandparents and my parents were picking tomatoes in the fields, and a plane flew over us and dumped chemicals on top of us. So this is happening to the most oppressed people, immigrants coming into this country looking for a better job and a better life. And fast track now to 34 years as a mother of 4 living in a sacrifice zone. I'm a fence line community member who is part of an organization for environmental justice. We have to understand that we're bearing the brunt, people of color are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And we also have to understand that without a planet, we really cannot see a future in working towards things I support, Medicare for all. There's environmental justice things that are going on in our neighborhoods that prohibit people of color that are in low poverty, low income levels, low education, to actually get access to health care because we can't afford it. So to just wrap it up, environmental justice encompasses every single progressive policy issue that I'm running to represent.
All right. Let's do some specific questions now. Councilwoman Edwards, it is rare that anyone goes from the City Council to the U.S. Senate, but I'm curious, what experience have you gotten on City Council in your first term that would prepare you for the United States Senate?
That's an excellent question. It is rare, but we have seen precedent for that. In fact, someone running for president now, Joe Biden, has actually gone from a commissioner to a U.S. Senator role, so there is some precedent. But
you've done your research, good.
But as far as it relates to my experience, a lot of people ask, you're making a leap. You're going from City Council to the U.S. Senate. And I think while it may appear to be a leap, it is exactly the type of leap that you need. You need leadership that has been on the ground with you. You need leaders that understand what it feels like to see policy from the top implemented all the way down and where those dysfunctions and systems break down. It's been my training and background to be a community-based leader. That's a servant leader who understands the value of buy-in from the community. We don't impose systems and rules and regs on the community without engaging and having them at the table. Because as you all know, when you're not at the table, you are what's on the menu. And in my time as a city council member, we have gone through great lengths, both to have vision, but also to serve the immediate needs, needs that are in the face of a disaster. 51 inches of rainfall came across the city that I represent. And I had to be out in the community, direct, making sure that we had proper response. But most importantly, I had to make sure that these folks are now having someone to ensure that they are recovering. And in Washington, their recovery has not been a priority. I have been flying to Washington, making sure that we are asking for resources. I have been making sure that we have been going door to door for our senior citizens who don't have the access and ability to muck out their homes and get a whole new life started when it wasn't planned. That's the kind of conviction you need. That's the type of focus on community that you need to really bring to Washington a plan to really make results happen for real people.
All right, you guys can't see this, but Ira has time cues down here too, so if you guys can just stand your time so we can all answer questions, it'd be fantastic if you don't mind. Chris, back to you. Houston knows you well from your time on council and serving in Congress as well, but that's been a few years. It's been more than a decade. A lot of people have moved into the state. The state has changed. Demographics have changed in the state. I'm curious specifically, though, what's your strategy now to reintroduce yourself to Texans?
Coming to forums like this.
That simple.
It's a big part of it. That's what campaigns are all about, introducing yourself to the voters, and it has been a while. And a not so funny thing happened in 2016. A man named Donald Trump was elected president. And I decided then that it was time for everyone who had been involved in politics to stay involved, or if you hadn't been involved in politics, to get involved. And we saw that. Donald Trump did something for us that I don't think the Democratic Party could have ever done for itself. It engaged us like never before, and you saw people coming off the sidelines and voting in droves in 2018, and they're going to come in even larger numbers in 2020. And I want to be part of it. I've been in the arena, and I want to be back in the arena to fight for working families and to stand up for the absolute soul of our nation. It is desperately needed at this point in time.
All right. Sema, in 2018, I didn't mean to scare you there. I know you sat right next to me, so I appreciate that. In 2018, you stunned Beto O'Rourke's campaign with your turnout and the vote you got in the Valley, with a quarter of the vote. But there's some political scientists and even some party leaders in 2018 who said you likely did so well because of your Hispanic name. Are they incorrect?
Absolutely, they are incorrect. I can tell you Texas voters, especially people who are voting in early voting, are the most serious, dedicated voters who know their people, that the candidates that they're going to vote for, that are going to represent their values. And that's what a primary is all about, is ensuring that the person that you elect to be the nominee is going to represent your values rather than worrying about name recognition or how much money you raise. And that's what we did in 2018. We changed the narrative and brought issues to the table that nobody else was bringing. And we used our political capital to push Mr. O'Rourke to sign on to Medicare for All. And after we endorsed on that basis, his poll numbers went up for the first time in 18 months that he had been campaigning. So part of his success comes from the campaign that we ran, which is completely grassroots. And I intend to continue pushing that grassroots campaign with our progressive policy issues, with unapologetically human honesty about where we stand and who we are, and being so bold as putting our campaign platform up for everyone to see, because you need to know where I stand and know where I'm going, and hopefully take all of you with me in that process.
All right. Christina, you've spent your career fighting for immigrant rights, Latino civil rights, immigrants, workers as well too. I'm curious, how do you translate that support and that experience into suburban counties where you need to get the vote out? How does that relate?
So there's two ways. One, I am a person that represents, I think, quintessentially what is Texas. I like to say I'm a proud Irish Mexican American. And my mom is the oldest of 9 kids from southern Mexico. And my dad is a white American that met my mom while he was traveling through Mexico in a VW bus with a bunch of folks from UT Austin in the 70s. But what I learned as a child is that no matter where you come from, the color of your skin, who you pray to, or who you love, that we all want the same things for our children and families. That we all want our children to be safe, to be healthy, to be treated with respect, and for them to go to great schools to become all that they dreamed of. So I know, and what I've done in my career that I'm most proud of is not passing X law or getting out X number of voters. What I'm proud of is that I brought black, brown, and white workers together, union and non-union, immigrants and American-born, to see that they had more in common than they had at odds. And that's what I'm going to bring to this race as well.
All right. Adrian, I asked you before we started, pronounce your last name for us so I don't mess it up.
Osegueda.
Osegueda. And Christina, your middle name, Sinsun?
That is very good. I said we were going to make a mixtape rendition of all of the
You
kinds
could.
of ways it
And
was
then
pronounced
Bell.
during the campaign. Yeah.
Adrian, I'm curious. You're from El Paso. You attended Princeton and got a degree in business from SMU. You've campaigned in the past for city council and for governor. What have you learned from those unsuccessful campaigns that you are doing differently in this one, or that you hope to do differently in this one?
I wish I'd learned more, to be honest. Look, when we ask these questions, we're asking about qualifications, and I think it's an important thing to understand. What I kind of lose sleep about is not my qualifications. I just work. Yeah, I'm just going to put my nose down to work. What you have to understand is I am an agent of you all. I'm an agent of the party. I'm an agent of where we are from a society standpoint. And one of the things that I have a concern about is how propaganda isn't just an instrument of the Russians. It's an instrument of our own parties, right? So from you as a constituent, what are you learning about our society and how it works? And so the only approach that I want to take is start from the perspective of you. What do we lack as citizens to make this change? Because my campaign wasn't largely successful because even though I talked about structural change, that message didn't necessarily resonate me, nor could I infiltrate the media, nor could I infiltrate certain elements in our party or traditional avenues of people that work. So the question has to be, what is it, that introspection that we have to do as a party to understand why are certain candidates getting elevated and others not? This is an important question because if the question comes back to us, what are your qualifications? If they question me on my qualifications, coming from Princeton with SMU, having run for some races, having experience at the local level, what do you think they think about you and your interests? Not a whole lot. So how do you get reflected in government and our candidates if the system itself does not elevate candidates that are coming to you with different ideas on actual solutions, not just regurgitating the same talking points that we've heard over and over and over? So I'm trying to challenge you how to think about that because it's things that I am thinking about every day. How do we get to elevate your voice and work on the solutions that we need? Thank you, Ira. I'm sorry.
And Royce, I'm not going to leave you out.
Okay.
You win each state senate election with 80 to 100% of the vote. You're influential in that chamber. You get legislation passed in the Republican-only chamber. Why do you want to step away from that when you're effective?
Because I can be just as, if not more effective, as the U.S. Senator. When you begin to think about this, and I want you to know this, we have 12 state senators in Texas that are Democrats. 10 of them are supporting me and endorsing me for the next U.S. Senator. We have 67 House members in the state House that are Democrats. 47 are supporting me to be their next U.S. Senator. And the reason is I've been able to work with Democrats and Republicans to get things done. Look at my past performance as my record. I haven't got, there's still a lot to be done, but I've always sat at the table and been one of the last persons at the table in order to get those things done associated with our fundamental values to make certain that all Texans are represented and the Democratic perspective is represented.
Several people mention gun violence. That's what's all in the news now. It's what has everyone scared to go to Walmart or anywhere. I'm curious what specifically, if elected, you guys think that could get done, obviously with Republican support in Congress. We'll start here with you, Sam.
With Republican support
You
in
have to have Republican
Congress?
support. Yeah.
Good God. We have to re-elect a whole new Congress, nothing but Democrats. Was right now, even Trump's favorite Democrat is accepting money from the NRA, and he is Couillard, and he's being challenged by Jessica Cisneros, which is amazing. But word out to her. She's watching this.
But what realistically could get passed?
Universal background checks for sure, and what I'm hoping is now that we have more, with all the school shootings that have been happening, I'm hoping that people themselves continue to talk about or calling their elected officials to implement a buyback program for the assault rifles and the semi-automatic weapons, because weapons of war do not belong in our schools, in our homes. They do not belong on the street, and certainly, and for someone to say that these AR-15s are used for hunting, I mean, who are you kidding? Are you a bad hunter? Everyone knows if you're a hunter, you're using a 12-gauge shotgun, but a semi-automatic weapon, you're just going to ruin the meat.
I'm curious. I interviewed LULAC's national president the other day. I didn't realize that Domingo Garcia is a member of the NRA. Is anyone here a member of the NRA?
No, I'm not.
Nobody? All right. Royce, you're not saying anything. That's a no?
Now, let me tell you why Domingo is a member of the NRA.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Speak for him if you want to.
So we can get their literature.
Okay.
Okay.
Does he distribute it to everyone else? Let's go on down the line here. Chris, you've served in Congress. What realistically, considering the divisiveness happening in D.C., what realistically can get done right now?
On gun violence?
On gun violence.
Well, with Mitch McConnell in power and his lapdog, John Cornyn, in power. And I know I've lost the lapdog vote now, but that's just, but nothing's going to get done. And we've seen that. And it's sad. And it really speaks to how broken our democracy is. Princeton University did a study that looked at all of these opinion polls on numerous controversial issues and found that whether there was almost 100% support or no support for an issue, there was still only a 30% chance that Congress would take any action. They are bought and paid for. And until you elect more independent-minded people, it is not going to change. And that's why we so desperately need a Democratic Congress, so we can have a ban and buyback program like they have in Australia, so that we can ban weapons of war, buy them back from their owners, and live in a much safer country. And it's high time we do that. They just hope that after one crisis, nothing else will happen and it will die down and we'll stop talking about it. Well, we're not going to stop talking about it, and I think people are going to see that come November 2020.
You know, that is a perspective, but that's not my perspective. My perspective is that we can get this done. We must get this done. Texas is ground zero. When you begin to think about, weren't you proud of the Democrats yesterday when we had those press conferences around the state of Texas saying that we need a special session? Weren't you proud of us? When you begin to look at the polls, persons calling in, taking polls at WFAA and around the state, almost 80% of the persons that responded to those surveys or polls said that they wanted something done. You remember when we had the issue concerning education in the state of Texas? When teachers got tired of being tired and they began to stand up, what happened? 2018 elections. And guess what? My Republican colleagues understood the writing on the wall. The voters were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so my point is this. In Texas, once we win this U.S. Senate race, I assure you that the things that are happening around in Texas will happen around the entire country. That is, people will be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Why do you think all of these congresspersons, Republican congresspersons, are retiring now? They see the handwriting on the wall. It's on the wall. And when we turn Texas blue, my time is up, but when we turn Texas blue, I assure you that we will be able to get something done in terms of universal background checks. I was with Ann Richards on this issue. That's how far back I go. I filed legislation in Texas to deal with universal background checks, assault weapons, and all of the issues that we're talking about. I don't feel no ways tired. No ways tired. I'll keep working on this issue as your U.S. Senator.
Amanda, what's realistic?
Our current U.S. Senator, John Cornyn, would have us to believe that sensible gun policies are not tenable because the issues are far too complex. And let me tell you, as someone who serves and understands what's still remaining to be addressed in our communities, the easy stuff, those ribbon cuttings were done a long time ago. And so now what's left is the stuff that requires a little bit of muscle, a little bit of understanding of interconnectedness of issues. And so if it's not just sensible gun policies, let's add to the table. Let's add to our package. And so in our case, I believe that there is no way that we should continue on without passing sensible gun policies, things like background check, universal background checks, things like red flag policies. Why do you need guns if you have a restraining order against you? Right? These are things that are very easy, low-hanging fruit that most people would gauge on a common sense level as something that we could do as Americans, but it's time to put the interests of the people first rather than the NRA first. And I will tell you, I've made good grades and A's most of my life, but what I don't want is an A+ from the NRA like John Cornyn.
Mi querido El Paso, I love you, and I hope this response reflects the best of who we are. And by the way, go Eastwood tonight. These are the standing rules of the United States Senate. And in my opinion, and how they operate operationally, it is unconstitutional. What you hear from Chris Bell is saying, hey, these rules, as long as Mitch McConnell's in charge, then what you have to do is change the rules. So this is structural change number one. How do those things operate in practice? There's no rule in there that you're going to find that says that Mitch McConnell controls the floor agenda. There isn't. But in practice, if you follow all the rules, it does in fact actually operate that way. So you actually have to go and change those rules. And if that means we have to sue the Senate as a member of the Senate, do I sue the Senate? Absolutely, I sue the Senate on constitutional grounds. So we talk about all of these things, like what are you going to do? Again, I'm tired of the talking points. Do the structural change that is required for us to make that change. And these things are littered. The down payment, so my first compromise is a 20% minority rule, which means the minority leader would at least control 20% of the agenda. And if that happened today, we could force John Cornyn to take a vote so that he doesn't hashtag El Paso strong. He actually has to do something to make El Paso strong.
After 26 children were killed in Sandy Hook, Congress did nothing. These policies are not controversial. We know that the vast majority of Americans support universal background checks, that they support the idea of American civilians not being able to buy weapons of war. But we do not have elected officials that are willing to enact the will of the majority of Americans. And so if we do not have elected officials that are willing to actually represent the American people, then we elect people that do. In my mind, that is the only way we actually move forward on gun reform. There are some folks maybe we can work with, but the vast majority of Americans stand on this issue, whether they are on the right or left. We just simply have elected officials right now that care more about their contributions from the NRA than American lives. And so I'm taking my lessons from the folks at March for Our Lives and Moms Demand Action, the young people that are clear about where they stand on this issue. March for Our Lives isn't just calling for gun reform, they're calling for young people to organize across this country and call out adults that haven't been leading on this issue. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by working hand in hand with the grassroots community groups and the survivors of gun violence across this country to make sure that our elected officials actually represent the American people.
Let's shift off to the other big issue in Texas, the border as well too. It has spiraled into a mess down there. I'm curious, if elected, what is the political solution to get a handle on all the immigrants trying to get into the southern border? And we'll start with you, Royce, and kind of work our way around that way.
All right, thank you very much. And you're right. Have you ever imagined a day in America where our government would take children and put them in cages? The United States of America, we're taking children and putting them in cages. Do we have an issue at the border? Yes. Does it need to be addressed? Yes. What are your specifics, Royce West? We have got to make certain that we go back to the countries where these persons are coming from and do everything in our power to work with those governments to make certain that they are able, those persons that would seek asylum in America are able to live in those particular countries. We've got to make certain that in terms of on the border, that we have a judicial system that is fully funded as opposed to money being taken away from government programs and going to some damn wall. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say that, all right? Yes, I did, all right? But we've got to make certain that we put in place an infrastructure that expedite those hearings, and we've got to make certain that we do, in fact, have the type of enforcement we need at the border without tearing asunder families, keeping the families together, allowing them to go through the system, and that requires additional resources, which means it needs to be a priority of the government, specifically the president.
But Royce, you said go back to those countries where people are coming from seeking asylum. We already sent hundreds of millions of dollars to Latin America especially. It's not working. It hasn't worked for multiple administrations. Why do you think it's going to work now?
Well, the question is yes, we have sent those monies there. The question is can we get the people there to act to help change some of those governments down there too? That has to be a part of it. And we've got to make certain that we're able to identify what the issues are there in those countries. And we've got to work with Mexico also to figure out exactly what role can they play, given the fact that you have many of those persons coming through Mexico, coming to the United States.
Chris?
Well, obviously, I agree that you have to work with Mexico to build up their economy. As someone told me many years ago, as long as you have people in Mexico living in cardboard boxes on mudslide hills, they are going to find a way into this country. And Donald Trump can build a 30-foot wall, and all that will do is create a larger market for 32-foot ladders. people are going to come to the United States. And we have always been a welcoming country, and we need to continue to be a welcoming country. Certainly, we have to control our borders, and we can have more border patrol guards. We can take greater advantage of technology using drones to send messages back down so we can cover a wider swath of the border. All of that is fine, but you also have to have true immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship here in the United States of America. It is absolutely absurd to pretend that we're going to deport millions of people, especially here in Texas, where it would absolutely devastate our economy. It makes no sense whatsoever. We need to come up with a plan for a pathway to citizenship.
Sima.
Boy, do we have a problem. And it's not going to be solved by building a wall, I'll tell you that, because all it's going to do is just really keep people out, because we know that's what it does, and keep America's dirty little secret of what we've been doing with our American imperialism, invading black and brown countries for the simple interests of the fossil fuel industry. That's something that we have to end. We want to end the border crisis. We have to look at what we've been doing as a country. I have been working on immigration issues as well as environmental issues, and one of the things that I am most proud of is being able to have a United States citizen, 18 years old, being held in detention, ICE detention center for 3 weeks, being able to get him out when no one else would step in, no other elected official would step in to free him. And that is unnecessary. Just because a person is of a certain color and doesn't speak perfect English, this person was targeted. So to solve these issues, we have to look further. We have to look at the bigger picture. Is our American imperialism is fueling the immigration crisis at the border. In order to solve that, and we have to also look at the racist policies that are being implemented by our government. So for us to wage war with black and brown countries is one, but then they come to our border to seek asylum and they're being denied, separated, and put in cages, which is nothing new for this country, because this country has a history of incarcerating black and brown people. Let's not forget the Native Americans. Let's not forget people that were enslaved from Africa brought to this country. So this is no secret. This is what America has been doing, and we have to change that by dismantling systemic racism and attacking these policies in a way that is just and passing true immigration reform that does not circumvent the United States Constitution or international law.
All right. Christina, you probably hear a lot of these stories. What is the best political solution to handle the problem at the border?
So perhaps no one in this room or very few people in this state have worked more on this issue than I have. We are in a building right now that I promise you was built by undocumented hands. Half of the workers who build our homes, our schools, and roadways in this state are undocumented, one of the top 10 industries in Texas. I have seen firsthand what happens when we build an economy that is willing to accept undocumented workers' labor but not their full humanity. And there are 3 things I know that we can do to work on immigration to create a humane immigration system that also supports our economy and treats immigrant families with the respect and dignity they deserve. We have to do 3 things. We have to fix our immigration system to make sure that people can come safely and legally to this country. We have to make sure we address the root causes of migration, like climate change, the drug war, and economic inequality. And the 3rd thing we have to do is we have to protect the rights of immigrant and American workers. And that's why I'm calling for substantial divestment out of ICE and into the Department of Labor for wage and hour and health and safety violations of immigrant workers to protect the rights of American workers. And the last thing I want to say on this issue, because I think it is so important, is that we have to call it the debate for what it really is about. Whether the Trump administration is talking about asylum seekers at the border, or cutting legal migration in half, or undercounting immigrants and their children in the U.S. Census, what we have to understand is these are the same old tools of poll taxes and literacy tests, repackaged with the same purpose: to deny communities of color from becoming citizens of this country. Because I don't think the Trump administration and John Cornyn is just afraid of my 62-year-old immigrant Mexican mother, but they are afraid of me, their U.S. citizen, her U.S. citizen daughter that can vote and has a drastically different vision for this country.
Christina, I want you to briefly clarify what you think should happen to ICE. You talked about divestment of ICE. What do you think should happen briefly?
We need to, so as someone that worked, while John Cornyn has been accepting contributions from the construction industry, one of the lead employers of undocumented workers in this state, I was representing undocumented workers who lost fingers, legs, and their very lives, because more workers die in this state than in any other state in the country. Every 2.5 days, a construction worker is killed here in Texas, building
but as far as,
our state.
yeah,
And
as far
why
as
I
ICE
call
goes,
for
though.
divestment of ICE out of resources is because until Congress is willing to enact the will of the majority of Americans that want immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship, if John Cornyn and the Republicans say they want to protect the rights of American workers, then they should fully fund the Department of Labor to enforce the rights of immigrant and American workers, and that's how you protect both immigrant and American workers.
Right. Adrian?
Growing up on the border, I think our policy was always vecinos buenos, right? How do you become good neighbors, right? And one of the saddest parts of what has happened in our immigration policy is the lack of confidence that the United States is expressing. If a child comes to your door as a neighbor, normally you take them in, you figure out what's wrong, right? The idea that the Republican Party tries to push this idea that how or why people are using children doesn't express the morality of our nation, which is that we take care of children, first and foremost. So in the short term, in terms of this crisis, we have to figure out a way to fund and make sure we are taking care of children as a first point. Second, and I'm going to interlace the environment here, I believe we're still kind of having an old debate about borders, and climate change is a very serious problem. And I don't believe we have the international structure yet that we're going to need to address the issue of climate change. One possible solution is that we actually talk about binational districts. Binational districts would afford dual citizenship to these areas. And it's a way of our citizens starting to become more informed about other systems of government that are out there as well. The reason for that is because one of the biggest changes that we're going to see are climate refugees. And this is going to happen all over the world, but specifically on our southern border. So we need to start thinking much more advanced about what this immigration policy is going to be. And it's an argument that I will push if you make me your nominee. Thank you.
Finally, Amanda.
With images of children lying in cages with no soap, no means to be cared for, not knowing where their parents are located, that's not America. It's this inconsistent with our American values, who we are as a nation in the world, and then also what we should be striving to become. And what's so important is that we not allow these atrocities to continue. We first stop the atrocities at the border. But we take this moment in time when atrocities like these occur, you have a choice. You can be complacent and allow it to continue on, or you can do something about it and let that be the catalyst for more change. We can use this moment in time to direct attention to this issue in a way that it hasn't been before. We can use this moment to spear on and to guide and lead comprehensive immigration reform. How many times do we hear those buzzwords? But yet and still, we don't see action. You've got dreamers, people who have been promised a pathway to be here in this country, who are in school, who are working. Now, with that called into question by one person by the name of Donald Trump. You have so many people in our communities who have been working, who have been part of communities like my hometown of Houston, where a vast percentage of people, over a quarter, are immigrant born. These are people that we have to protect. We also have to make sure that our systems in place make a pathway for people. If you have to wait 20 years to get into this country, then maybe there's a problem. So we have to look at it in terms of what is the paradigm we've set up, what is the paradigm that we want to create so that people can contribute and add value to our society, and we stop using them as scapegoats for our inaction as it relates to how we've been able to build the economy. So a lot of the time we go into communities that have had jobless displacement and job loss, and we say, you know who took your job? It's an immigrant, somebody who came here illegally. We have allowed Donald Trump and his support team, I'll call them, to instill fear, but what it is just scapegoatism and hate. We have to stop it, and it must stop now.
Let's have some clarity, too. I want everyone to raise their hand if you agree with open borders. Who supports open borders? Raise your hand. Not in the audience. The folks who drove a long way to get here. Okay, just for clarity. I'm going to do a lightning round right now. I'm curious. Let's just go through this pretty fast, but we'll start with you, Seema. On what issue do you agree with Donald Trump? On what issue? It could be anything.
Very briefly, TPP, like shutting it down completely, but then he quickly backtracked to it. So it's just more of the, platitudes talking and just trying to get people to support him. But TPP for like a second.
All right.
And that was it.
Chris?
He says he supports the GLBT community, so I would agree with him on that. I haven't seen a lot of action in that regard, but I do support that stand.
I'd support him on some of the criminal justice reforms that he's made.
Amanda?
Recently, there was in the tax plan of 2017, there was something called opportunity zones that were passed. And although in the rules and the laws as they are written, it does not require investment in under-resourced communities to be altruistic or something that it benefits the existing residents or communities, I believe we can use that as a means to make sure that we're bringing investment into those communities. Is it a double-edged sword? But I do think there's possibility there, and we just have to bring residents to the table in order for that to come to fruition.
You can run out the clock. You're ready to go for U.S. Senate on that one, Amanda.
I agree.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I agree. He thinks he's great.
And Christina.
I think that where there's one agreement with Republicans and Democrats is about the opioid crisis that we face in this country, about the fact that we have a massive health crisis. Where I want to see more action and disagree a little bit with Trump is that I think that we have to hold accountable pharmaceutical companies which made millions and millions of dollars off the harm and suffering of millions of Americans.
Let's do one more. On what issue could you work with Mitch McConnell? We'll start with you again, Seema.
There isn't any.
All
No,
right.
sorry, I don't.
Chris?
Well, I would work with him on any issue, but I don't expect him to take my position. But I'm happy to work with the Republicans. That's how you get things done in Congress. But I'm not going to bow down to Mitch McConnell, and I would certainly fight every day that I'm there.
I'd work with Mitch McConnell on moving his office and him becoming the minority leader.
And he's done. I would say in terms of just trying to make sure that we're stimulating the economy, we look at our crumbling infrastructure. For those of us who drive, fly, whatever we do, everybody can agree that the conditions in which our infrastructure exists today are completely untenable. And so I think that's one space, that we can at least see eye to eye on the fact that there needs to be infrastructure investment across America that will put people to work and that will also build back our cities in a way that's meaningful.
I go back to the issue about the Senate rules of the House. The question itself is already problematic, right? You're asking, what am I going to do with one senator who should have the exact same standing as any of us if we were elected senator? We have to really start addressing these structural rules because in this hierarchy, it's a hierarchy. We fought the Revolutionary War to get rid of monarchies, and we have an existing monarchy inside of our legislative bodies. This is hugely problematic. And if the rules mean that we take a little bit of power away from Nancy Pelosi, more power to it. Because again, this is taking a voice away from you. And again, this is representative democracy. It is not elect somebody to go and serve as an oligarch or a monarch in a body of water. So we really do have to change that. And the question itself starts to get you to start thinking about what the problem is with how our government is structured and why we start to need structural change.
And Christina, on what issue could you work with Mitch McConnell?
I believe in working with anyone on any issue, even if you don't agree on always the outcome. However, I don't believe in compromising on your values or standing up for the American people that you represent. So I would gladly work with him, like I said, on any issue, but there is no way that I would ever sell out the people that I am working for in Texas that are tired of the policies that Mitch McConnell has put forward that have made Texas have the highest uninsured rate in the country, that have made Texas the front lines of the immigration debate, that have made Texans the front lines of the gun violence debate. So I would never sell us out on any of those issues. That I would give him the opportunity to come around to my position, of course.
Several of you have mentioned climate change as well, too. It's a real threat, but the state's largest industry, as you guys from Houston know, is energy. So I'm curious, as a senator, if elected, how would you address climate change while still helping those companies in Texas that are in the energy industry still sustain thousands of good-paying jobs? Amanda, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. I mean, in a place where we had about 3 500-year floods in a row, 3 years in a row, I think we won't be due for another one for another 1,500 years. But it's a case where we have seen the effects of climate change, and it's been extremely costly. It's extremely difficult for rebuilding, and so we have to get serious about that. So looking at things like emission standards, looking at how do we increase renewables, making sure that people are in a better place and that we're taking our environment seriously is critically important. Otherwise, it will continue to cost us lives. It will continue to cost us billions of dollars. For those who might not think that climate change is real, just take a look at the price tag associated with it, and I think you would think differently. So we have to be vigilant in working alongside our community members, our corporations, seeing how we can go about reducing the challenges that we're bringing about in our very own environment.
Royce?
You know, we need to be back in the Paris Accords. We need to do that. This country needs to be back in. There's no way in the world that we will be able to solve this problem just as the United States. It's got to be a global solution to this issue, and President Obama tried to lead us in that direction. Trump took us out. The reality is that yes, this state is based, the economy is based in part on oil and gas. There's got to be a balance. I knew during the legislative session, I carried some legislation that Section 312 agreements, where the industry, oil and gas industry, was trying to keep out green energy, solar and wind. I insisted upon that they be placed in that legislation so they'll be able to get the same types of tax breaks as other industries. And so from that vantage point, it's going to take a balancing effect. There's no way in the world that we're going to have oil and gas just all of a sudden drop, fossil fuels just drop in the industry associated with it. We've got to make certain that we continue this discussion about making certain that this world is a world where we can have different types of energies that are utilized in order to make certain that when we go outside today, that we're not dealing with 110, 120 degree temperatures. And you know exactly what I mean.
The Republican Party can continue to pretend that climate change is not real, but when your home floods 3 times in 3 years like ours did, and the last time you spend the night in your home, you wake up to 6 feet of water, you know that climate change is very, very real, and it becomes very, very personal. And we probably had it a lot easier than a lot of other families who suffered through Tropical Storm or Hurricane Harvey. So this is another issue where Texas could lead the way. We have vast resources of renewable energy. We can continue to be the energy capital of the world if we'll look to the future and plan for the future and take advantage of those renewable resources. We can point the way if we have the right leadership. Right now we don't.
Seema, climate change versus the state's biggest industry.
Oh, I'm going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm the only candidate up here that has signed the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. And I do that because, as I said before, I'm someone who believes very strongly that climate change is real. I believe in environmental justice. Being a mother of 4, living in a sacrifice zone, fence line community, I drive my kid to school Monday through Friday, and down the street on the other side of 225 is the largest oil refinery in that area, which is Shell. And You see it directly from my kids' drop-off zone. Every time we have a flare, and I'm ready to transition, and I know the state of Texas is fully capable of transitioning to a Green New Deal, to environmental justice, to create community-owned power infrastructures, energy infrastructures where it's community-owned. That way we can stop subsidizing fossil fuel industry companies that are not even part of the United States. They belong to other countries. They come into our communities and they set up shop and they produce toxins. They pollute our area. I was part of the ITC organizing coalition around that issue to bring forth some environmental justice policies at a county level and called for more accountability. Understand that the fossil fuel industry doesn't create jobs. We in this room create jobs. It's called supply and demand, simple economics. We can choose with our money, our pocketbook, our bank accounts, what we want. And if we start transitioning ourselves away from the fossil fuel industry, buying more clean energy, investing in it, calling for a divestment of the fossil fuel industry, that's how we begin to make a change from the bottom up, not the top down. But let me tell you, once I get there, I'm going to make sure that I meet y'all halfway, if not all the way down into our neighborhoods in Pasadena, all the way into the sacrifice zones of Corpus Christi.
Christina.
So no state emits more carbon than Texas. So we have more to gain and lose on this issue than anybody else. What I'm clear about is that we're not going to solve it by individual action. We're not going to solve it by leaving it up to the oil and gas companies to figure it out for us. It's going to require a national focus of the private sector, of individuals led by our government. And it's going to mean that we put forth real solutions that are going to tackle this problem at the ambition and scale that we need to. That's why I'm supporting the new Green New Deal. And what you have to understand, it's a resolution. We currently have a senator that just recently realized climate change was real. While he was not enacting real policy reform or leading on this issue for 2 decades, wasting time. We now have 12 years to make real action on this issue. And that's why I want to make sure that we position our state to be a leader on this issue, that we cannot have an oil and gas industry in the state that provides so many jobs left behind. They can either choose to come and be part of the renewable and green energy future of this state, and for those corporations that want to come along, they are welcome. And for those that are unwilling to change and want to continue to pollute our families, our community, and our planet for future generations, we will leave them behind.
All right. Adrian.
Climate change is by far the biggest issue just in terms of the scale and scope of what we are going to have to do. Not even close. The short-term issue is always the economy. So you have to understand when FDR created the New Deal, what he had was what Lincoln called public will, right? Because you had high, very, very high unemployment. So if you think about the political will that FDR had to enact the New Deal, all the elements were there, right? Because all of us were outraged by not having a job, by having to sell apples on the corner, by seeing our neighbors and our relatives do this. The challenge with climate change is it's not right in front of us. And yet all of the infrastructure that we're talking about, the petroleum industry has existed for so long, it is the core infrastructure we've built upon. So now we've got to build all new infrastructure. We've got to take a whole new approach to international affairs. Rihanna Gun Right, Sunrise Movement, New Consensus, keep doing what you're doing, keep pushing, because that's helping to build the public will that we're going to need in this fight. The issue that we're going to have to do is force our corporate, they're our neighbors, right? We can talk bad about corporations. Our corporations are fellow Americans, but we have to start forcing them to put this issue up because they are actually in the best position to start figuring out how to mobilize the big investment that we're going to need to change our entire infrastructure in this. But we need to put political pressure if they're not willing to do it on their own. The issue that I would like to do is to say, hey, they already know. It's a conservative policy. Look, in business, if there's a 20% risk of something happening, you view it as a viable interest that you must look at. The environmental statistics that we're seeing more than put this over as a 20% chance of what happens if those degrees go up. So it's a conservative policy that business should embrace to start addressing this issue, and we need to start mobilizing all efforts on this front.
All right. I have 2 pages more of questions, but I don't have time for that, Ira's telling me. So let's go to our closing remarks. Seema, we'll start with you.
We're all going to leave here today, trying to figure out who is going to be the best person to represent us as a nominee for United States Senate to defeat John Cornyn. And you're looking at all of us up here, and a lot of us have experience. A lot of us are doing this with the best of intentions. And I'm here to tell you that I am all in. I am here to represent the state of Texas. I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to ensure that every single one of us is represented, our needs, our economic infrastructure, that we reform our government in a way that represents us. And I'm here to run and win, to represent the most marginalized people as well. I am a proud Latina. I am an indigenous woman. I'm running on the issues that matter most and impact the most marginalized, to prevent this kind of atrocity to continue happening up the chain. And I can tell you, as a woman of color, I have lost my train of thought. Running as a woman of color is challenging. Absolutely. Running as a single mom is challenging. Running as someone who doesn't have millions of dollars is challenging. Running with someone who does not have that name recognition is extremely challenging. But I do it anyway. I get up every single day and I continue to push on the issues. I do not get discouraged. I will not back down. I'm showing you who I am, where I stand, and I am happy to take those questions, and I'm happy to answer in the most honest way that I can, and tell you that I'm not going to back down from John Cornyn. I'm not going to go back to the center. I'm going to continue pushing forward for progressive policies. And I hope that I can earn your vote. I can earn your trust to go forward into the general election to defeat John Cornyn. Thank you.
Chris?
Jason made a very serious mistake when he told us he would not cut us off.
You're right. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Everyone's violated it, so I apologize.
That's like a license to kill for
It is.
politicians. Thank you all so much for being here. It really means a lot to feel the energy in this room, and I think we all know why we're here, to get rid of Donald Trump and John Cornyn, so that we can get our communities back, and so that we can take control of our lives once again and make the America that we all want to see. Jason asked Adrian a question earlier about races that he had run and lost, and I didn't get the question. I couldn't answer. But ladies and gentlemen, there's no shame in running and losing an election. The shame is in not caring and not trying to change our world. When I got redistricted out of Congress, I didn't stop fighting. I came back to Texas and ran for governor during one of the bleakest times for the Democratic Party here. And we came closer than anyone since Ann Richards to winning that election. But the difference between then and now is night and day. People were so depressed. People were so full of pessimism back then. And now I talk to Democrats, and they're full of excitement. They see the opportunity, and they know that we can change things come 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our moment, and I invite all of you to join me in seizing it. Thanks for being here.
First of all, I want to thank WOW for putting this together, along with the Frisco Democrats and the Collin County Democrats. Let's give them a hand. I know many persons in this room, and many persons in this room know that our core values as Democrats I've been true to for many years, and will continue to be true to those particular core values. When you look at issues of education, you will see that I put my fingerprints on issues of education. When you look at issues of health care, you'll see that I've been right in the room in terms of trying to expand Medicaid. When you look at issues of LGBT rights, I have been in the room on those issues. When you look at women's rights, when you look at when Wendy, you remember, when Wendy was on the floor, when we were fighting about issues concerning women's rights, I was right there on the floor, battling right there beside her. When you look at issues concerning redistricting, when we had to leave the state of Texas for some 47 days, I was there fighting. And my wife got mad at me because I told her I was taking her to Las Vegas. We ended up going to Las Vegas, New Mexico, population of 1,000. I've been there. I've been there. I've been here for North Texas. When you begin to look at a person who has readied himself as a testament by the number of colleagues throughout the state of Texas that are endorsing him, I'm ready. When you begin to look at when I announced for public office, the very first day I announced, John Corning decided to put up a television advertisement against me. Remember that? When the Democratic presidential campaign was here in Texas, John Corning decided to put up an ad during the Democratic debate against me, not one, but two. I tell you what, you give me the opportunity to debate John Corning, I'll show you exactly what type of leader he hasn't been. Texans lead, I will lead. If you need additional information about me, go to roycewest.com. And once you go to roycewest.com, this is a shameless plug, you'll say that Royce is your choice.
One of my favorite parting words of President Obama before he left office is when he talked about how the power lies in the hands of the average, ordinary American citizen. And that, my friends, is more truthful than you may know. It is time for us as a community, as Texans, to reclaim that power. You need a leader that understands who the bosses are. It's not about me. It's not about somebody who's in a swivel chair with a nameplate. It's about you all. This election is about you and the things that you need and desperately want to see change in your community and in your homes. This is about realizing the potential that we possess as a collective and actually putting somebody in office who is dedicated purely and focused solely on achieving those results for you. That's what this election is about. This election also doesn't start with my announcement and end on Election Day. This is about creating a people-powered movement that really empowers you all to begin to see the results you hear people talking about. You will actually realize the changes, the access to health care you need to see, the economic opportunity that you deserve to see. You will see that when you put a leader in place who's focused, who knows how to get things done in government, and most importantly, knows who's in charge. And this is a chance and an opportunity for all of us to take a stance and make sure our voices are heard and our lives are changed as a result. Thank you very much.
"20 years before Ronald Reagan, we heard a different inaugural address. What John F. Kennedy understood was that 175 years before he took office, our founders had declared their independence in the world, and the task of his generation was to declare our commitment to the world. Now, many of us understand and feel that the country has lost its way, but we must understand that the path of America is never far from liberty and justice. Our youngest generation rightfully feels anxiety and uncertainty about the promise of our institutions. When we think about the rise of nationalist authoritarian sentiment, when we think about the undermining of our federal institutions, the undermining of our media, when we think about the environment, climate change, inequality in the world, and the state of institutions and the state of democracies around the world, we must understand that we are the answer to that problem. We are that eternal flame that has always been the light for the world. The age of divisive cynicism must be over. All of us must rise, and we must fulfill our sacred obligations as citizens of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. In the middle of the day, I was so impressed to see a packed audience. You know, I think that all of us know, and especially y'all, because how many of you are Democratic activists? Probably the whole room, right? So you all know what is on the line for this election. That if we change Texas, we're not just going to change the political outcome of this state for an election cycle. We're going to make political change for a generation in this country. But there is no way we do that in this state without young voters, black, brown, and white voters, and Latino voters coming out. That we have to build a diverse coalition, something that I've done my whole life and gotten out voters that many times never have voted before in their lives. But we also have to know that John Cornyn and Donald Trump and the Republican Party are also very clear about what's on the line this election here in Texas. And what we have to be prepared for is the fact that they're going to play dirty tricks, that they're going to try and divide us, to pit Americans against one another, to try and make us believe that we do not share the same interests as black, brown, and white Americans, as LGBTQ and straight Americans, as immigrant and American born. And they're gonna do all of that to distract us from their own failures, their own raw ambition that has cared more about holding onto power than our own families and our own needs. But I also know that this year, they're not gonna veer us off course. They're not gonna stop us from coming together to build a government that understands that our success lies in their success. Because I don't think it's too much to ask that our kids go to great schools, that they graduate college debt-free, that they have good paying jobs. Do you think it's too much to ask that we start to judge our economy not by just how well big corporations are doing, but by how well ordinary Texans are doing? You all don't think it's too much to ask that we start giving mothers paid maternity leave to take care of their newborn children? And do you all think it's too much to ask that we leave it up to women, not politicians, to decide when they are ready to make a family? And do you all think it's too much to ask in the richest nation of the world that we guarantee that any Texan that is sick can go to the doctor when they need to and have the highest quality health care? And do you all think it's too much to ask that if you've worked hard your whole life, that you should be able to retire in dignity and with security? So when you hear from my opponents and our opponents that our plans are too big, too ambitious, you just go on and tell them that in Texas we dream big because we are big and we can solve these problems. And let's also be clear that we're not just running, that this campaign, all of us running for Senate are not just running against John Cornyn, but we're also running against Donald Trump. So my message to Donald Trump, John Cornyn, and their supporters is, if you want to cling to the past, you can have it, but the future belongs to us.
All right. A lot of you guys came a long way to be here today, and we appreciate you coming up from Pasadena, from Houston, Austin, tell me again, Christine.
Austin, 4:30 this morning. Woo. Can you tell?
Thank you for getting up. I appreciate you coming up and introducing yourself to the Democrats here, too. Thank you, guys. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Ira? Hold on just a second, guys.
Hey, everybody. Glad you came. I don't think this is working. Are you glad you came? And they said that people would not come to an event like this in the middle of the day. Thank you. I learned one very important thing today also putting on this event. Never take the job of timekeeper. Not fun. Thank you to Collin College. Thank you to Plano Area Dems. Thank you to Women Organizing Women. Thank you to Chris Hollins for driving up from the TDP. Thank you for the SDEC reps who we didn't recognize. Brandon, is Sally here? Right there. Thank you guys for supporting us. Huge round of applause for these candidates again, please. A huge thank you to Jason Whiteley for coming out here. The primary election is when? When is the primary election? March 3rd, 2020. The general election is November 3rd, 2020. Make a voting plan. Bring friends and family with you and first-time voters, and let's say it together. Let's turn Texas blue. Thank you.